Well, welcome. Good afternoon. My name is John Clauson. I'm the Executive Director here at Kitsap Transit, and I want to welcome you all to our third in the series of virtual community meetings today. I will say that we've had two earlier meetings that I think went very well, and based on the fact that we have over 60 people that subscribe to participate in this meeting, kind of indicates to me that this is a good format for reaching out to the community and sharing kind of some of the things that are going on in Kitsap Transit. I am going to start out with a little bit of a PowerPoint and kind of share with you some of the things that how this pandemic has been affecting Kitsap Transit, both in the since the start of it to date, as well as doing some projections into the future as to how we're going to be able to respond, at least to the best that we can know at this point. I wanted to share a little bit about the process first. After I finish with the short presentation, which should take maybe about 30 minutes, we have plenty of time for questions. And if you go into the chat function and share your questions, then Sanjay Bhatt, who is our public information person here, Sanjay will be able to read your questions, and I will try to answer your questions as best I can. If I don't have the answers for you, if you provide us your contact information, I'll certainly get the answers and make sure that we get them shipped out to you. The other thing I want to point out is these webinars are all being recorded. So if you tune in late, or if you miss something and want to go back and listen to it, these will be available on Kitsap Transit's website early next week. So I would just encourage you to go to kitsaptransit.com and you'll be able to see where these virtual meetings are recorded and stored. I think that's kind of a quick summary of how we're going to proceed with this. I do want to start out, though, acknowledging and recognizing the great team that we have here at Kitsap Transit. And as you can imagine, as for all of us, we have been experiencing a rapid changing world. We've had to adapt to our new environment, and the team that we have here has just, in my opinion, done an outstanding job. And they have, from our frontline staff, our bus operators, our ferry crews, and our maintenance crews, both the bus and boat maintenance crews, but also our facility maintenance crews. They have all been just doing a fantastic job of making sure that we keep Kitsap Transit operating and doing it as safely as we possibly can. Certainly, I would be remiss if I don't also recognize all of the various administrative staffs. A large portion of them, like many, have been working from home and just doing a fantastic job. And those that we've deemed to be essential have been coming into a new environment with a lot of mask wearing and separation for social distancing, and just doing a fantastic job of ordering the supplies that we need, finding new sources of suppliers for the various personal protective equipment, for example, and others. So anyway, I just wanted to publicly acknowledge and pass on a thanks to the great team we have here at Kitsap Transit. With that, I'm going to go ahead and get started with the presentation. And basically, as I said, I want to share with the community kind of the effects that COVID has had on Kitsap Transit, as well as some of the things that we're planning for and some of the actions that we've been taking to deal with this pandemic. To start out with, I want to talk a bit about the financial impacts. This is a report that's produced basically on a monthly basis, and one of the challenges that public transit has in the state of Washington basically is that we are so dependent upon sales tax. 85% of our budget is derived from the local option sales tax that is collected here at the community. So as you can imagine, as our economy changes, we have to be prepared to respond to it. And with the economic impacts that we're experiencing with the COVID-19 pandemic, this is something that we're watching closely. And I want to point out just a few things. Now, one thing I want to point out is you'll notice that this report basically covers the first 3 months of the year. Unfortunately, there's about a 90-day delay between the time that you purchase something at a retail outlet and before we get the information on that sale. It just has to be collected by the vendors. It has to be turned into the state. The state then does their magic before we get notice of it. So that's why the delay. The most up-to-date information we have currently is up through March. And as many of you know, the stay at home, stay safe directive from the governor occurred in the latter part of March. So really, we're only seeing just a bit over a week of the economic impact as a result of this pandemic. But with just that information, there's a few things that I would point out. The first one, this set of numbers basically compares on a month-to-month basis what we actually collected versus what we had budgeted and anticipated to collect. You can see that in that case, we're down about 18.6% of what we anticipated that we should be receiving. On a year-to-date basis, this looks at the total amount from January, February, March, in both, again, what we had budgeted, what we anticipated to receive, down to what we actually did. And you can see that from that perspective, we're just about 8% under. And then this particular number looks at just comparing the year-to-date changes. In this column, it's the month-to-month changes from 2019 compared to 2020. And when you look at that one, you're about 16% down. Now, this graph shows the revenue for the transit portion, the bus side of the ledger. As many of you know, we recently, a few years ago, we passed the ballot measure to implement a fast ferry program from Kitsap to Seattle. Those funds are in addition to these numbers, but they have to be tracked separately since those funds can only be used to support the passenger ferry operation. So although the numbers are lower as far as the total amount, the percentage that you see here is essentially the same regardless. Now, if you consider what we anticipate seeing and trying to prepare for the future, we actually developed 3 different scenarios, and we looked at the possibility of it being down 15%, 25%, and 35%. Again, we don't know, but we're just trying to prepare for what may be coming with the changes. Now, when we look at these percentages, we're looking at the accumulation of a full year's worth of operation. We now have 1 quarter, and we anticipate that the next couple of months are going to be pretty devastating, but we're not quite sure how quickly we will recover from the economic slowdown. So again, we're just making projections here to see exactly what those impacts would be. Now, this includes basically all of our major revenue sources, not only sales tax, but fare box revenue. Our ridership has dropped. Initially, it dropped like 74%. So that's going to have a long-term impact on the amount of fares that we're going to collect, parking revenue, and so on. We also, if you look down at the bottom section, we're talking about what are some of the added expenses that we're experiencing. as a result of the COVID-19. If you look at this one, you can see kind of the accumulated totals of what the impact is going to be for the transit side of the ledger. Now, some of you may have heard or read that Congress had provided through the CARES Act funding some funding for public transit. And this is where this line is. This is what we're expecting, and we've been notified that we're going to receive through the CARES Act funding. So there is a certain amount of revenue that we're getting from the federal government that's going to help us deal with the impacts of COVID. When you look at the ferry side of the ledger, once again, it's pretty much the same, except the numbers are lower, including the amount of CARES Act funding that we're going to receive for support of the ferry program. When you add all of those up together, you can see what the different projections indicate. If 15% is all that we experience, you notice that we will have a bit of a surplus at the end of the year, which in my mind is great in the sense that that will also help us carry into 2021 to recover some of the potential decline that we're going to experience in 2021. As you move across the ledger, you see that when we go to 25 and 35, it looks a bit more concerning in that we're going to be substantially lower than what we had anticipated. Now, I would add that if you've been following Kitsap Transit for a while, you will remember that because of the strong economy that we've been experiencing up to prior to COVID-19, our Board of Commissioners allowed for us to put funding away in what we were referring to as the recession fund. Basically, it's a rainy day fund, and so in that fund, we have basically an extra $4 million that would help us, once again, deal with the short term. Not knowing what the recovery is going to look like, some are predicting a rather rapid recovery. Others are predicting a much slower recovery, but this number, these numbers basically look at just what's going to happen through 2020, and we'll have to deal with the future as it becomes better known. Now, what are some of the things that we've been up to, and what are we doing? Well, first off, with the stay at home, stay safe directive from the governor did provide for essential transportation, essential workers. So we've had to respond in a variety of ways, one, to protect our own employees, as well as things that we could do to protect our passengers to make sure that we're providing safe transportation for the Kitsap community. We've done a variety of things, and I'll go through a few of them. But you know, essentially all of the things that we've been hearing initially, we've been implementing within our own operation about you know, the way that we can protect our co-workers and our riders from any potential exposures, as well as things like, and we'll talk about this later, some of the reductions in the number of people that will carry on our buses so that we can provide that social distancing. One of the first things that we did is we really beefed up the amount of effort that was going into cleaning and disinfecting our coaches. That has gone up substantially. And these are just a couple examples. The photo in the top left is that we're providing a log sheet in every one of our coaches that indicates when the coach was cleaned and basically by who. So when the operator goes into their bus in the morning, they can check to make sure that the coach had been cleaned before it goes out into service. And they have received instruction for if they have any doubts of the cleanliness of the bus, that they can simply request it, and a new coach will be assigned to their work piece for the day. The top right and the lower left are just examples of some of the sanitation efforts that we're doing with these coaches. They're actually being sprayed with an iodine-based disinfectant that will kill the coronavirus as well as others. It basically is the same type of system that hospitals use, and the iodine-based is similar to what folks use for protecting open wounds and things of that nature. So it's very safe to us, but pretty devastating, thank goodness, to the coronavirus. In addition to that, you see in the lower right corner, beyond simply the spraying, we also do deep steam cleaning, especially as it relates to the upholstery and the coaches, so that once again, we're making sure that these coaches are as clean and sanitized as we can provide them for the community to ride in. We've also implemented some additional protections for the operators, and I'll give you just a couple examples here. You'll start seeing these being installed in our coaches. Some of them have already been installed, and we're working to outfit all of our coaches. These are basically operator health shields that will provide a bit of separation between the operators and the riders. This is very similar to what you're seeing now in grocery stores and things of that nature, where I think in grocery stores they refer to them as sneeze guards. Basically, once again, it provides better separation between our operators and our passengers to basically protect both. The one on the left shows this health shield in its position that will encapsulate the operator, if you will, and the one on the right is that same shield can be swung open, and it provides yet another separation between the operator and the rear of the coach, and it opens up any restrictions between the operator and the right side of the coach. Additionally, we've installed, basically painted a new stand behind line on the coaches. You can see it's basically 6 feet further back from the line up in the top of the picture. That is, once again, to provide additional that safe separation from our operators and our passengers. And in addition to that, we are in the process now of installing these face mask dispensers on our coaches. We're going to be asking all of our riders to please use some kind of face covering when you ride the buses. And if for one reason you don't have face covering, we're going to have these masks available on each of the coaches that you'll be able to go ahead and take one and put it on. And I know there's a lot of debate over the benefits of wearing face masks. Some say it's beneficial, others say it's not. We're going to be asking everyone to please wear some kind of face covering, just in an abundance of caution. I would rather find out that we had everybody wear face coverings and we didn't need it, versus we allow people to not wear face coverings and we find out later that it was needed. So again, in an abundance of caution, we're going to be asking folks to please wear face coverings. And if you don't have one, we're prepared to provide you with one. We've reduced the capacity of our buses. This was done primarily to provide that social distancing for our riders, to make sure that we're providing you with service that is safe as we possibly can. You will see a bit of a difference between the maximum bus loads of our routed buses and our worker driver buses. If you're not familiar with the worker driver program, these are buses, the large buses that are designed primarily to carry Kitsap Naval Shipyard employees. They have been in operation for the most part through this entire process that we've been going through. The big difference there is the fact that PSNS requires all of their employees mandatory to wear masks while they're working, and as a result, they're also required to wear masks when they're riding the worker driver buses, which we're comfortable knowing that 100% of the folks that are on those buses are wearing face covering. And in addition to that, they've also implemented a program where where each person that boards the bus, their temperatures are being taken to make sure that they're not exhibiting any of the signs that would indicate that they have the virus. The local fast and fast ferries, we've reduced the capacity on those once again to deal with the social distancing. And just as a comparison, the boats normally can carry anywhere from 118 passengers. The boats in Port Orchard mostly up in the 150 passenger range, and some of our boats up in North Kitsap in excess of 200 passengers. So you can see the impact that that has had. You can imagine the impact that's had on our ridership on the buses. We've also developed a COVID-19 special page on our website. You can go to the web page and get all the up-to-date information that we have in relationship to how we're responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. If there's been impacts to your service, you're able to go to a page that indicates what routes have been reduced and which ones have actually been suspended in operation, and get up-to-date information on whatever changes that would occurred there. The service reduction was done primarily in response to the rapid and dramatic decline in the number of riders. We experienced in excess of 70% drop in our ridership, and so we suspended a lot of the service that was completely not being utilized. Basically, most of it was commuter related, and we scaled back, like I said, up to about 30%. So here's the service change page that you can go to from our website, and you can get up-to-date information on the route that you're planning to use. We've also, as many of you know, if you've been using Kitsap Transit, we removed the fare collections from the buses. That was done primarily to reduce the interaction between riders and drivers, help with the separation, social distancing. We actually stopped boarding on the coaches that we could from loading through the front door. We are asking folks to load and deboard from the rear door, and we reserve front door access primarily to disabled and seniors so who can navigate the back door easily. So as far as the fast ferry reservations, we stopped those for a couple reasons. One, certainly the demand dropped to the point where reservations were no longer needed, and secondly, once again, to reduce that face-to-face interaction between crew members and riders. So that's pretty much a quick summary on what we're doing and what we're looking into the future and how we're trying to prepare for the future as demand shifts. I will say, in regards to the changes in service, with those routes that we've reduced and with the limits that we put on the number of passengers that we'll allow on the bus, there are occasions where we will reach the capacity of the bus before the bus has finished its route. In that case, we have buses and operators positioned around the community so that if a driver experiences that, they can call into our dispatch center, and dispatch will send one of those buses and operators out to pick up the folks that may have been left at a bus stop and providing the transportation. As we go through into the future, and if we see that occurring on a regular basis, we will then schedule an actual addition to that particular route for that particular trip to make sure that we're providing service and responding to the growing demand. That's pretty much right now how we're planning to move forward as we work our way through the COVID experience, and we're going to be adding service as needed, but it's going to be driven by the demand, the current demand, and not the anticipated demand. This page actually is advising you of a survey that we're currently conducting, we would invite you to please go and fill out the survey. Basically, it's asking you questions about, what your use patterns were for Kitsap Transit. If you're planning to come back to Kitsap, what's important to you as far as things that we can do to make that work for you. So again, I would encourage everyone who can to go to that address, fill out the survey. It only takes a few minutes to fill it out, and it would be very much appreciated and very helpful for us to be able to better plan as we move forward. With that, we have some time set aside for questions. And once again, I'd invite folks, if you have questions, send them in through the chat system. Sanjay Bhatt is online here with us as well. Sanjay is going to be capturing the questions and conveying them over to me. And once again, I'll do my best to answer those questions. And if I don't have the answers, I would be happy to get you the information and get it sent out to you. So with that, Sanjay, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'll wait for the first.
Okay, thank you, John. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to attend today. Like John said, if you have questions, go ahead and type them into the question panel. I think the most common question we received through the registration form that you all filled out is, when will the Southworth to Seattle Fast Ferry service be up and running? And kind of included with that question is an update on the status of the boats that are being built. Take it away, John.
All righty. Well, I wish I could give you a definitive, we're going to start service in Southworth on such and such a date, but unfortunately, it's become even more challenging to predict exactly when. The pandemic that we're experiencing has also impacted the folks that are building our new boats. Unfortunately, we were hoping to see delivery of the first boat earlier this year, and it hasn't arrived yet. So we're waiting for that delivery. So that's going to be one of the biggest challenges that we have, is basically the delivery of the boat before we're going to be able to predict exactly how soon we would be able to provide that service. As far as an update on the boats themselves, I do have, and let me see if I can bring it up here. I do have some pictures on the new bow loaders, and just to give you a quick snapshot of their current state of completion. This is the first one, the Anytime. It is nearing completion. It's, as you can see, it's not in the water yet. We anticipate that it will go into the water hopefully next week, but it's still a good at least 30 days away from anticipated delivery. So basically, once they put it in the water, they tow it up to another facility that they own, and then they finish up a lot of the work while the vessel is actually sitting in water. So there's still a fair amount of work that needs to be done, although it is something that we can actually see and touch and climb on. Here's just one shot of the inside with the new seats and life jackets and so on. So it is a reality. It is getting close. It's not quite there yet. Unfortunately, this is the second boat and its current state. The commander, they haven't even been able to finish the hull yet. As you can see, this is the front section. We're standing on the rear section of the vessel, and this piece in the middle here that's not even been completely framed up yet is the engine room component of the vessel. So as you can see, we're a ways away from having a vessel or both vessels, and that's what's really going to drive the start date of the Southworth service. So we are continuing to work on all the other pieces and components to being able to implement the service. But until we get the vessels, unfortunately, that's kind of where we're at in our current reality. So I guess that's all I can share on that point. We will certainly continue to keep the community informed as we move forward. We're very anxious to get the service going as well, especially now with the challenges that the city of Seattle is experiencing with the West Seattle Bridge. The sooner we can get this in operation, hopefully maybe we can relieve some of the pressure on the West Seattle Bridge problem that they have.
So a follow-up question on that. Understanding that the Enitai goes to Kingston and their current boat comes to Southworth, what is the time from delivery to commissioning at the dock, including the dock check with WSF? Not quite following that, but that's what the question is.
Well, let me make sure that folks understand the process that we have planned out to this point. The first vessel that we get, the Enitai, the plan is that we will take it up and start operating it from Kingston, primarily to kind of work the kinks out, if you will, of a new boat. I mean, a new boat, even though it's new, it's a piece of machinery, and there will be issues that we will discover, and we will operate it in that setting so that we can kind of work the bugs out. Then once we accept delivery of the second vessel would go back up to Kingston, and then we would be able to move the Enitai with theoretically all the bugs worked out and start service in Southworth. Now, the only boats that can operate out of Southworth is these two new boats. So if, for example, we had a problem with the Enitai, we would then take the other new boat out of Kingston and bring it into Southworth as the backup. The boat that we're currently using in Kingston, the Finest, would then go into frontline operation on the Kingston route until we could get the Enitai, for example, repaired and back into service. So that's kind of the plan on how we're going to be moving forward with the implementation. So it really does require delivery of both boats before we're going to be able to start Southworth.
Another question is, will there be new bus routes established to serve the Southworth Ferry when it does start up?
Yes. One of the things, we just recently finished a community survey specifically targeted at the Southworth potential riders, and some of the information that we've gleaned from that is, you know, how many folks are going to be interested in riding the buses and from where, and those sorts of questions that are going to help us plan out the future. But we are anticipating adding bus service to support the Southworth Ferry. If for nothing else, if these boats are going to carry over 200 passengers, if just everybody parked at Harper and wanted to go down and connect on a sailing, we're going to have to put more buses on just to transport people from Harper down. So yes, it's a long answer, but yes, we're planning to. I just can't tell you specifically where and what.
Another related Southworth question: do you have any new update on Coleman Dock?
Nothing new. The concern that we have going forward, as I mentioned, Seattle has experienced problems with the West Seattle Bridge. King County has been talking about potentially responding by adding additional sailings from West Seattle, which is going to make the available dock space in Seattle even more challenging. We have had a meeting collectively, King County and Washington State Ferries and myself, to talk about and explore what other options might be available, up to and possibly even including that these boats are designed to pull into a car slip. Washington State Ferries, would it be possible to pull into one of the car slips at Coleman Dock? Unfortunately, with the construction that's going on in Coleman Dock, it's not quite as easy as just simply saying yes, because they're struggling to keep their service operating with the construction schedules that they're working with on the improvements there. So not both car slips aren't going to be available all the time, and that's going to make it challenging. We are looking at what other options may be available. I know King County has just released an RFP or RFI process to see if there are any private operations that are interested in possibly supplementing some of King County's ferry service and or including providing some additional dock space for Seattle waterfront. So there's a lot of things that are going on at this point. I'm not aware of anything that has been definitively signed up, but it's being actively pursued.
So question that's on the bus side, when is the 86 route going back to normal?
Excuse me, that's a good question, and I really can't say specifically when. As I mentioned before, it really is going to be driven by the demand. When there are folks, adequate number of folks that are back to work, if you will, that can justify the service, then we'll certainly look at bringing those services back. But right now, I mean, if we go to phase 3, which the county has applied for under the governor's program, that certainly will change the outlook within Kitsap County. But if King County just now went to phase 2, you know, that's going to have some impact on the ridership as well. If folks aren't going back to work quite as quickly in King County, the demand is going to continue to be low. As I mentioned early on, we experienced a 74% reduction in demand rather quickly, and a lot of that demand was focused primarily on the commuter-based. So long answer, sorry, but at this point, I can't give you a definite prediction on when it'll come back.
Just one other point that may be helpful to the person who asked the question is if you do not currently subscribe to our rider alerts, I would encourage you to do that. We push these notices to your email when we have a service change. And for example, on Monday, we'll be adding a Route 86 trip departing at 5:20 a.m. from the bus stop along Mile Hill at Retzel, going to the Port Orchard Ferry Terminal. And that's been added just to address some of the overcrowding that we are seeing on buses as more people are returning to work. Another service-related question, John. When will Annapolis commuter bus and ferry begin operating regularly?
Probably not for a while. And the main reason for that is that when we started the construction at the Annapolis dock, we moved the ferry that ran Annapolis to Bremerton over to supplement the Port Orchard to Bremerton service. We put in bus service that would take people who normally ride the Annapolis straight into downtown Port Orchard, and we anticipated that demand would be in excess of the capacity of the boat. Well, then came the pandemic that we're dealing with, and we had to put the limitations on our ferry boats. So it has become even more important that we continue to operate the two routes out of Port Orchard, or the two boats out of Port Orchard. Basically, what that means is by doing that, we have a boat leaving either Bremerton or Port Orchard during the commute period every 15 minutes. So if we reach capacity on a particular sailing, worst case is in 15 minutes, we'll have another boat there that can take you to the other side. So because of that much higher frequency and dealing with the limits that we have to have put on boats, we're probably going to continue to operate that two-boat operation out of Port Orchard and keep the Annapolis route closed down as it is today. The parking lot, we've reopened the parking lot for folks who park there, and we're enhancing the bus service to get folks from the parking lot down to the Port Orchard waterfront to connect with that service. So until things with COVID changes significantly, we're probably going to maintain the current operation that we have.
This is a related question, given the, you just touched on the ferries and the capacity limits. How long will healthcare workers have priority boarding?
Well, probably until we get the capacity issues relaxed some. I've been in a lot of communication over the last however many weeks with our local health district. The one question that I had posed with, if we're successful in moving to phase 3, in phase 3, we're allowed to have gatherings of up to 50. Would that mean that I could relax some of those restrictions? And I was informed, at least at this point, we still have to maintain the social distancing. So the limitations that we have is based on social distancing. And as long as we have this pandemic and the issues related to our healthcare workers, they will continue to have their priority boardings. Now, I will say that we have, in some cases, for example, in Bremerton, the first sailing that we had out of Bremerton, we were routinely leaving folks at the dock who were primarily construction workers. So in response to that, we actually started an earlier departure out of Bremerton that has helped an awful lot for those construction workers that were able to take a bit of an earlier sailing. So we were able to deal with the demand issues by doing that. But that for a while is going to have to be how we're going to respond to these issues.
Another question is, when is Kitsap Transit going to start charging fares again?
Well, as soon as we can, given the fact that we want to do it safely. We want to do it safely for our passengers as well as our crews and operators. The installation of those driver health shields that I showed earlier, that will be a big component that once we get those installed, then we feel more confident in starting collection again. I would like to start as quickly as we can, simply because of the unpredictability of what the economy is going to do. At least that's some level of revenue that we can start bringing back into the agency. But I want to make sure that we're able to do it safely. I'm on the phone right now twice a week. Wasn't long ago that 3 times a week, all the general managers of all the transits in Puget Sound were on a phone call. And we all are very interested in being able to bring back the fares, but we want to do it safely. We're talking about maybe not allowing cash fares, just to reduce that potential spread of the virus. If we were to do it with like the Orca card, for example, that's just an electronic quick tap and go, and would reduce the amount of time, the interaction time between riders and operators. So we're looking at all those issues. Hopefully July, early July, but until we get those protections installed, I'm not going to commit to starting at any particular day.
For those of you who are listening and have not yet asked a question, please take a minute if you have a question and type it into the question panel. We want to make sure everyone has a chance to have a question. John, is there any more information about Southworth that you wanted to share? We're looking through the list here, and we've gone through what looks like all of them. So if you have anything else you want to add on that.
Well, I would just as a piece of information, we talked about the landing needs in Seattle, and looking off a little bit into the future, just so that everyone is aware. We have recently retained the service of a consultant that is doing an alternatives analysis for us on the Seattle waterfront. Basically, it's looking at all the potential landing sites along there and coming up with a list of preferred locations. That's kind of the first phase of what we need to do to move forward with a more permanent long-term solution. We have also just recently been awarded a grant request that when we receive it, and admittedly it's a couple years out yet, but we had asked for and were awarded $2.5 million to actually bring on services that could take it to the next step once we find a location that we could start with the preliminary engineering and design work for the eventual installation of a facility. So from a long range perspective, we are moving forward with a more permanent and long-term solution to the challenges of the Seattle waterfront, and we're excited about being able to move that project forward. The other thing that I would share with the community is that we also were just recently awarded some funding that we're doing jointly with Washington State Ferries that would start and continue actually the design and planning work for a second car slip at Southworth. And by the installation of a second car slip, when we're able to do that, that too will help Washington State Ferries operation immensely, as well as provide greater flexibility for our use in that dock and relieve some of the potential constraints that we're dealing with about schedule development around availability of docks. So we are moving forward not only with the immediate needs, but we're also looking now at kind of the long-term improvements that we can make to help with being able to provide a good, reliable schedule for the Southworth route.
Okay, let's see. I have a very broad question that's been posed, John. When will we get Sunday service back?
My honest and direct answer, it's going to be a while. If you weren't part of the discussion that we had a while back, when the passenger ferry program was approved by the voters, we were able to move our Port Orchard Bremerton operation out of transit dollars and into the ferry dollars. By doing that, we freed up at that time, it was about $1.5 million a year of bus dollars. And then we went into a process of, okay, how does the community want us to spend that? And we hired a consultant that did a lot of work, about a 2-year process with the community to try to determine what's the preferred alternative. And the options were we could do Sunday service, or we could do more frequent and later and earlier service. And the consensus that was derived through working with the community was they preferred the more frequent, later and earlier service. So that's the direction we decided to go with and put Sunday service back on the drawing board. So right now, I can't predict when Sunday service would come back. It's not something that we are actively planning right now. We've been working on the original consensus, which was the more frequent, later and earlier, and we started with that implementation prior to COVID. I would also, just as kind of an overall concern, I guess, or just something I wanted the community to be aware of, the future, as you've heard many times with this pandemic, is clearly unknown. You've heard the term that we're in uncharted territories, and that's certainly the same as it relates to the future of the funding. Depending upon how quickly the economy grows, is going to really dictate of how we are able to move forward as we come out of this COVID problem that we're dealing with. And nobody knows when we're going to be out of this problem. Nobody is certain as to how quickly the economy is going to recover. So I just need to put that caution out there that, you know, we've done our projections on what it would look like at 15, 25, 35. You saw those numbers. If it's in the 35% category, we're going to have to be very, very careful. Now, having said that, I also have to acknowledge that Congress really helped us out with the CARES Act, and there's been lots of discussion back in DC about future funding to respond to the COVID issue. I have no idea what that's going to look like, if at all. So there's just so many variables as we move forward from an economic standpoint that I just want to caution folks. We're going to have to move forward through this and move forward carefully with all of us involved, and make sure that we understand how the economy is going to impact us.
John, doesn't look like there have been any new questions asked. I think one person had a follow-up just to clarify, what is the actual construction duration of the Untitled remaining? I can't quite understand what they wrote, but I think that's what they're asking.
Well, I'm hoping, I've got my fingers crossed, that we will get the Untitled delivered end of July, 1st of August, first part of August. That's my personal hope. There's a number of things, once again, that's kind of beyond the norm. So we'll just have to wait and see, but I'm hoping that we should be able to see the boat in the next couple months. That's the first one. I haven't a clue on how to predict how soon we're going to see the second vessel.
We have about 6 minutes left. If you want to add anything else, John. The one thing I'll say to folks before you leave, if I haven't already, is that this is the first time we've done these quarterly meetings completely online, and we would like your feedback on how you think the experience was for you. And so after the webinar ends, those who attended will receive a follow-up email with a link to an evaluation, and we'd love to hear what you think went well, what we can work on if we do this again in the future. Thank you. John?
And I think, you know, I guess I would close by once again thanking you all for spending your afternoon with us. I very much appreciate the opportunity to share kind of what Kitsap Transit is up to. I would much prefer to do this face-to-face. I feel like there's better interaction, if you will, and it certainly helps me a lot to hear what people are thinking and talking about as we plan out our future here at Kitsap Transit. But we'll have to wait until those opportunities avail themselves again. But in the meantime, once again, thank you very much for your time and spending with us today and providing your questions. Doesn't have to stop here. If you have any other questions, go to the website. You can always drop in an email with the customer service or call our customer service, and love to hear what the community is thinking. So with that, stay safe, follow the guidance that we've all been receiving on how to protect ourselves and our family and our community from this virus. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.